Alright, so part 6 of the bot tutorial here. There's two things I want to cover. One is saving data to a text file. A lot of times when you have a bot, you'll want to save submission email addresses or what you want if it displays what you want on the screen. In the case of this bot, because it's a sweepstakes and we don't know if we won when we play or not, I decided that we'd focus on the proxies. So when we're botting, there are a lot of proxies that are either invalid because they're no longer available, or maybe the proxy doesn't support HTTPS, as we covered before. And as we submit, if the submit goes through properly, we want to keep that proxy IP in a list, so next time we run the bot, we can just use that list instead of our original list to speed the whole botting process up, so it doesn't have to go through all those bad proxies. So to do this, you'll go into the bot, you'll find the submit entry function, go down into where we look at the response of what we submit, and as you might remember, the response, if it starts with a 1, it means that the submission went through successfully. So right here we'll want to add in our add to a text file code, and this can be easily done by using the file class, and that actually gives you access to quite a different few functions here, but the one we'll focus on is appending all text, or append all text. And what this does is it opens a file, appends the specific string to the file, and closes the file. If the file doesn't exist, then it creates the file and then closes the file out for you. So append all text, the first thing it wants is the path as a string. Yes, they know. And what we'll do is we'll just call this proxies.text. And because I don't supply a actual path, like C: bots / whatever, blah blah blah, it's going to look for this file or create this file in the same folder as where the exe for the bot was ran. And then we'll want to add in a string that contains the proxy IP and the proxy port. So we'll do proxy IP, make sure we put that colon between the port and the IP, so plus colon plus proxy port. And then we'll want to add a new line character to this, so that the next proxy that gets added goes into the next line, and not the same line, creating this very, very long string of garbage. The next thing we want to look at is, because we allow the user to either turn proxies on or off, we want to make sure there's actually a proxy IP and proxy port to add to this list, instead of just adding in blank text and new lines and all that crap. So we'll come back up to the if statement that decides whether or not we're going to use a proxy for the submission. Copy that if statement, come back down to the file class function here, and add that in. And just to reiterate here, what this says is, as long as the proxy IP string is not null or empty, and as long as the proxy port string is not null or empty, we're going to add this to the proxies.text file. And it's as simple as that. Now to demonstrate, we'll go ahead and start the bot up. Hit random, use proxies. Lots of noises today, guys, sorry. Add in the zip code and the phone number. Grab our list of emails. Ta-da. And then grab some proxies. And we'll go ahead and delete that file so you can see it create it. Hit start, and it should go through, and as it submits, you'll see it create the proxies file. If you open it up, there's the one proxy. We're at 2 submits now. Open her up, 2 proxies, 3 submits, 3 proxies, and so on. Now you will notice that it takes a while when you hit the stop button for it to stop, and that's because there's currently some operation going on, like it's trying to post to the site, and the bot will freeze while it's doing that unless you build in threading, which we'll talk about in a future tutorial here. But for now, just know that things will freeze. You guys should all be used to that and other people's bots, things like that. But the other thing I want to cover today is the actual proxy list looping. So if you come back up to the for each loop within the start botting function, where it loops through all the emails and then tries to submit using that email address, within the check use proxies if statements, we have it look for the first item in the proxies list and split that by a colon, which actually, if you look here, I forgot to add that here, so we'll add the split right there too. But in this case, if there's no proxies in the proxies list left, the bot is going to error out right here, and it could error out right here. So we want to fix this so we don't error, but first I want to demonstrate what it will do when it errors. So we'll come back in here, load this back up, throw in some emails, and this time just throw in a couple proxies, and we'll grab like 4, right? 90210, 704, start her back up, and after it finishes these proxies here, we should get a nice little error. And there it is. Index was out of range, must not be a negative or less than size of collection. And the reason for this is because the proxies list no longer has any proxies in it because we've been deleting them as we go. So same thing would happen right here if it happened within the while statement. So we need to do 2 things. We need to check to make sure there's actually at least one item in the proxy list before we try to split the first item in the proxy list. And we'll have to do that in 2 spots here. And if there are no items, we want to break out of all this, give the user a message, and stop the bot. So what we want to do again is type in if the proxies list .count is greater than 0, then we're going to go ahead and try and get a proxy. I'm going to do all that. There we go. So if the proxies count greater than 0, go ahead and try and split it. Else, if the proxies count is equal to 0 or less, which it's not going to be less, but it could be 0, we're going to give the user a message box dot show you have ran out of proxies. And then we'll do a break here to break out of this for each loop here, which in turn will put them right here and end the bot, stop the bot. And we can go ahead and say btn stop.visible and say false, because at this point the bot's not running. They don't need to see the stop button. It'll give them a visual representation showing the bot has been stopped. Well, that's fine and dandy for this split right here, but say there is one proxy left or one line left. It tries to split it. It finds that the length is not equal to 2, meaning that it didn't have a colon in it. So then it tries to remove that one and then split the next one in the list in this while loop. We need to make sure that we check for the count before it tries to split here too. And this is where it gets a little bit more convoluted. We have to do the same thing. If underscore proxies dot count is greater than 0, then go ahead and try and split it. Else break. Alright, so it's going to break out. It will end up right here. Well, that's no good either. We need to make sure that if we hit this breakpoint here, it's not trying to use a proxy IP and port that doesn't exist. So we need to create a flag before this for each statement. So we'll do bool out of proxies equals false. Right? And we take that. Yeah, they know. And else break. So when we get here, now we have to check for that bool. So if out of proxies equals true, we're going to do the same thing as we did down here. Yeah, expression is always false. I know, because we have to come back up here and say out of proxies equals true. So now what's going on? Well, that just looks like crap, doesn't it? But let's try to explain it to you. So the first thing we want to do is outside of the for each statement, which is what loops to the emails, we set a boolean of out of proxies to false, meaning that we're not out of proxies yet. It goes through, it does its jazz, it gets the first name, last name where needed, phone number where needed, and then we get down to proxies. And if we check use proxies in the bot, the first thing it's going to do is check to make sure we have proxies to use. If we don't have proxies to use at this point, it's going to pop down to this else statement, give the user a nice little message saying you've run out of proxies, change the stop button to be invisible, and then break out of the loop and stop the bot. But if there is at least one proxy to use, it's going to try and split that proxy at the colon. Well, if it can't split that proxy at the colon because, say, it's just an empty line or it was a poorly formatted proxy address, it's going to remove that line from the list, update the text box on the bot so the user gets a visual representation of what's going on, and then it's going to check the proxies list again to make sure there's still one available. If there is at least one, it'll go ahead and try and split that one by the colon again. At this point, it hits this while and sees if the length is not equal to 2. If it's equal to 2, meaning the proxy address got split properly, it'll continue on. It'll see this out of proxies equal true, which it won't be set to true yet because we never hit this else statement. It'll continue down and set the proxy IP string and the proxy port string to the correct values, which would be the proxy 0, proxy 1, trim out the extra fat, and continue on. Now, if we're stuck in the while loop and we end up deleting all the proxies because they were poorly formatted or it was just an extra line at the bottom, something along that lines, then it goes to this else statement. And this else statement says that we're going to set out of proxies to true and then break out of this while loop right here. Once we're broke out of the while loop, it hits this part right here. And then it says if out of proxies equals true, go ahead, give the user that ran out of proxies message box again, make the stop button invisible, and then this time we're going to, yeah, they know, break out of the for each loop. Because when you're in a loop and you use break, it only breaks out of the loop that you're currently in, which is why all of this crap had to go on. Now granted, you really don't have to do this if you don't mind having your bot error out, but for the sake of going into something a little bit more complicated where you have to really think about what's going on, we did this. So at this point, I can come back to the bot. We'll choose our random information, 485, don't do that, I know, 210. Okay, put in a area code, grab some emails. And grab a couple proxies. There we go. I'll just grab these here again, and we'll just grab there. Start the bot up. And there's your message. You have ran out of proxies. Once we hit OK, the stop button is going to disappear and the bot will be stopped. Boom. There you go. And thank you for dealing with my little daughter here, talking to you, and see you next time.